Hello and welcome to today's video featuring the Aeldari Corsairs voidscarred kill team. Today we'll be tackling the Felarch, which is the leader, but you can apply the same techniques used here to paint the rest of your squad, or indeed the new Corsairs that have been recently announced. I was so hyped for that box that I pulled these guys out of my beat the backlog pile and wanted to get working on them straight away. So we are going to be working from a black prime here, followed up by an overall base coat of a 50-50 mix of Sotek Green and Incubi Darkness. I have applied mine through the airbrush to get this vibrant teal color. You could just apply it by brush just as easily. And I've had a look through my list of paints, and there wasn't really one that hit this particular color, so I just made my own. First up, we're going to go through and pick out all the base colors, and starting with Vallejo Black, we'll pick out all of the dark armor parts. Looking at the box art and the images online, as a general rule, this seems to be any of the areas that have the decorative gold elements on them, which in this case is the shoulder pad, the armor on the belly, the greaves, and the vambraces. Then with Khorne Red, the superior red, we're going to pick out all of the fabric. This is the cloaks, the decorative straps, the belts or sashes, and we're also going to use this to base in some of the gems or the spirit stones across the various models. You can pick out whichever ones you want to be red here, or check the reference pictures on the box art to see where G-Dubs has put the red gem. Zandri Dust next, and we're going to use this to pick out all of the areas that we want to appear to be bone. The grenades, the weapon casings, the inside of the cloaks, and some of these guys have what I'm going to call craft world face masks, i.e. smooth, nice looking, as opposed to angular and gold trimmed, and you can use this to base these into. Alright, next up is Mournfang Brown, and we're going to use this for all of the leather holsters, the straps, and the pouches. Then we are going to use the best gold, which isn't a gold, that is Runelord Brass. This gives us a nice old gold look, and we're going to use this to pick out essentially all the decorative parts. Okay, we're going to very quickly apply the base colors for all of our gemstones now. Essentially Caliban Green for the green ones, Incubi Darkness for the teal ones, also the eye lenses, the blade of the weapon, and the crystals on the gun. And we're also going to use Scream Pink for the purple gems and the weapon grips. There are a few small areas of silver now, so we'll base them in using Leadbelcher. This is essentially the clasps on the various belts, as well as the little hook that attaches this grenade to the belt. I'm going to pick out the hair from the helmet and the other plume from the back now, using some Corvus Black. The last little bit to base in now is the fur on the top of the cloak. On the box art, this is an orangey brown color, but I am going in a slightly different direction. We're going to have white fur, so I'm going to base this in using Mechanicus standard grey. Alright, there you are. This guy is essentially tabletop ready. Slap some Nuln Oil over the armor and you are good to go. However, we're really going to take this guy to the next level now, starting with some thinned Basilicanum grey. And we're going to panel line the model. Next up, with an equal mix of Sotek Green and Kabalite Green, we will use a chunky highlight on the Teal Armour. Make sure you do thin your paints with water or medium, just to make this application a little bit smoother. Continuing with the Teal Armour now, we're going to use a mix of Sotek Green and Sybarite Green. Then we're going to add some white into the mix, or you could just use Ghostbuster Green if you have it to pick out some of the areas we want to emphasize further. Alright, that's the Teal Armour done. We're going to next start by highlighting the Black Armour, and the chunky highlight for this is just Incubi Darkness. Continuing with the black highlights now, we'll use a mix of Incubi Darkness and Sotek Green to highlight within the areas we've just painted. Then, using Sotek Green on its own, we can pick out the edges that we want to be a little bit brighter. And then, using some Temple Guard Blue, we can just emphasize a few more details. The last thing we're going to do with this now is add in a little bit of white to our previous color, and we're just going to dot highlight some of the corners or areas where our highlights overlap. The next area we're going to focus on is the red, and we're going to use some Mephiston Red here. So we're going to paint over most of the areas of Khorne Red that we put down on the cloaks and the cloth, leaving some of the darker red in the shadows and the recesses. Then, using a mix of Evil Sunz Scarlet and Mephiston Red, we can carry on highlighting, just covering less and less area with each brighter color, following the direction of the cloth. Then, using a mix of Evil Sunz Scarlet and Fire Dragon Bright, we can further highlight the edges and the folds of the cloth. Alright, we're going to focus on the leathers next. We're going to use a mix of Mournfang Brown and Zandri Dust to highlight up the brown leather here, leaving our base coat in the recessed areas or those that we wish to appear darker. I'm going to add a little bit more Zandri Dust into that mix now. I'm going to continue highlighting up the leather. And then just using pure Zandri Dust, now we can edge highlight some of these parts just a wee bit further. The next area to cover is the bone, and we're going to use some Seraphim Sepia just to add some shadows to the recesses and the bases of the Aeldari bumps and nodules. I don't know what they are, just the smooth bumps that you're not painting as gems. Once that's dry, tidy that up with some Zandri Dust. Whilst the shade on that was drying, I used some Dark Reaper just to pick out the strands of hair that we'd previously painted Corvus Black. And then using some Eshin Grey, we can pick out the edges of the handles of the gun and the sword. We're then just going to use some Dawnstone just to further edge highlight the black areas we've just done, but also to pick out the fur on the cloak. Time to finish up the bone areas next using Vallejo's Bone White, and we'll simply use this as an edge highlight to cover up the areas that are all Zandri Dust. Then using some white, I'm using dead white from Vallejo here, just to pick up the tips of the fur on the cloak. Okay, let's pick out all of those gems and fancy bits, starting with the teal coloured gems, the eye lenses, and again also the crystal parts of the gun. And we're going to use Sotek Green here. Just keep in mind that we established a base coat of Incubi Darkness on these parts earlier on, so do use that to tidy up if you need to go back in first. Mixing in some Sybarite Green, we're going to paint a slightly smaller area over what you've just applied. Then using Sybarite Green on its own now and covering a slightly smaller area, you're looking to try and paint a V shape with the point just towards the center of the helmet here on the eyes. Then using a white color, again using dead white, we're going to paint a small line highlight under the curve of the gem and a dot highlight in the corner of the eyes. Okay, next up we're going to do the red gems. Again, keep in mind we base coated these with Khorne Red and some Basilicanum Grey earlier on. It's literally rinse and repeat with the process for these gems, just changing the colors as we go. So the first color we're going to use here is Evil Sunz Scarlet, and this is going to cover most of the area. The next color we're using is Wild Rider Red, and we're just going to keep painting consecutively smaller areas within this. Then, using Fire Dragon Bright, we're just going to paint another smaller crescent shape on these gemstones. To finish up, we will use a spot of white on the lower curve to highlight and finish these off. Tackling the green gems next, and these were base coated in Caliban Green. And the first color for these is Warpstone Glow, and we're looking to cover most of the area again. Then using a 50-50 mix of Warpstone Glow and Moot Green for the next smaller curve. And then using just Moot Green on its own, following the now well-established process. And lastly, just a little curve of white just to finish it off. The last gems we're going to do are the purple ones now, and again, just a reminder, we base coated these in Screamer Pink, and we'll be doing these slightly differently than the others by just adding in more and more white to our pinky purple mix, and essentially using that to paint each of the consecutive layers. So, starting with Screamer Pink and white in a 50-50 mix, go in and paint your large area. Then just keep adding in a smaller and smaller area, more white each time, and finally finishing off with a dot of white at the bottom. So I've gone in and used the Teal Gem recipe here to paint in the crystals on the gun. Just apply them in the same order as the gems, and essentially rather than using the white to highlight the curve at the bottom of the gemstones, you're using it here to edge highlight these sharp edges on the crystals. The last bit we need to do now is working on the sword, and I decided for some reason that a crystal sword would look much better over a much easier to do metal one. So let's get cracking on with that. We began by base coating the sword with Incubi Darkness, as we did with the gems, and then working some super thin layers here, we're going to glaze a transition onto the sword to give it a super smooth transition. And we're going to start with Kabalite Green, and here's just how thin that needs to be. And we're going to start about 2/3 of the way down the blade, and we're going to begin by gently sweeping the brush in the direction we want the gradient to be, starting with the darkest area, moving towards the area that's going to be the brightest. You will not see much at this stage, but we will be doing several layers of this, moving up the blade, starting about a brush's width from the previous starting point each time. Work the gradient the other way on the back of the blade, and here's how that looks after about 15 of these layers. Next, using some Sybarite Green, and again, here's how thin it is. It's basically a threatening of color at this point. We'll follow the same steps, however, we're going to be going over essentially 1/3 of the blade, again in several thin layers. Alright, and then we're going to use Gauss Blaster Green, and we're going to do the same again, but just over the last quarter of the blade, or just the tip. We're going to use the Gauss Blaster Green again now to begin edge highlighting. Now this is essentially just slightly thinned, not glaze consistency, and you should be familiar with edge highlighting by now. Then using some white, we will continue to edge highlight, covering the brighter areas of the blade just to help these stand out a little bit better. Alright, there you go, base yours to match the rest of your army, and you are done. If you have enjoyed this video, please do like, share, subscribe, and drop a comment below if you found something in this video useful. The new Corsairs Battle Force box should be winging its way to me in the next week or so. So do let me know if you would like me to paint any more of these in the comments below. Take it easy, and I will catch you on the next one.